I God, whatever, it's got to be a house for I God, right? Right, you know? It's got to be that, does it not? Right, yeah, so you're right, that's correct. Thank you so much, my dear sister. Think about that, you know. But then you have to ask the question, you know, is this Zora Neale Hurston putting that in there, or were there actually men who did that? Yeah, and there were men who did that. And she drew right on her own history and herstory, whatever. Can you imagine, but can you, stay with me, can you put yourselves back in that time and think what it was to be a man, I'm down to the woman yet, a man who decided to do all that? Can you imagine the mindset, what that meant? That he had to have a vision beyond himself for a moment there, you know. But what happens when you get something like that finally, you know? If you don't really have a vision, if your vision is just, I want the house, I want this, I want that, and then your vision is not about the people, whatever, you get lost. You know, you get lost on the porch when you become combative, you know. You get lost when you say, I God. We see people out here already lost all the time. You know, already lost. We see people today who get money, right? And they get lost. You know, and they don't say I God, but you know on stage they think they God. You know what I mean? Whatever, whatever, you know. And so that's the same kind of thing that we see here with this man, when he says, you know, categorically, I God, whatever. And I remember the first time I read that in a place called Schaumburg, my head popped back. I said at the time, how could he say I God? I thought that was sacrilegious. Is it sacrilegious? Huh?
Sense of blasphemy.
I didn't hear you.
Sense of blasphemy.
Is it?
Well, it depends on your worldview.
Okay.
It depends on your worldview or your religion. So maybe he was radical, either highly narcissistic or highly radicalized around how he thought about God, and is God in me, is God in me, am I God, am I connected to the greater source? I'm sure it had to be narcissism, but he also could have been tapping into because he clearly wasn't functioning from a secondary consciousness, so within the context of people who were, then that is blasphemy. Within the context of people who felt entitled, maybe it was true. Not to say it's not narcissistic, but I guess he was God because he created his world.
Well, the only world he could create was the world that he had been enslaved in. So perhaps he does have a secondary consciousness, you know, because at some point all he could do is create what he had been a part of. See, that is the terrible blasphemy of our enslavement. That is the terrible thing that our enslavement did for us. It created people who would say, I God. It created people also who would, in a very real sense, give up. Yes. You know, it created people who said, I don't deserve anything else. It created a woman who would hate blacks, remember? You said, I hate blacks. Yeah, I understand why white folks hate black folks. I hate them. There are people like that today.
Yes.
Because
I have a comment because when he said I God, but could it be that he's actually giving thanks to God for him giving back to everybody else? Because these people didn't, when he first got there, these people living in shacks.
That's
they
right.
had like the clothes, their roads was like super small.
That's right.
And everything.
And
they was on top of one another
right.
at the same time. And then he came. He gave back so they can expand. They can build a house. They can bought the land. So it's like when it kind of. I don't know, but when I read it, I didn't even think of it the way you guys are explaining it right now. So it's kind of new right now for how you explain it. But what I got from it was like seems like he's actually giving back. But
I know.
it's like there's something else hidden there as you just put it on it.
He's an amazing business person.
Yeah,
Really. That's what it is. This is a middle class. This is this middle class coming up. You know, not everybody was poor. You know, but this is beginning of coming from Margaret Walker's, book where that middle Violet comes up. She and her husband go, they build a house, they go down to the white store, they get all the seeds and stuff they need, they plant, everything's fine, they come down and the guy says to them, what does this guy say to them? Oh, you owe me more money. And so they give them more money, get more seeds, whatever, and they plant and they work and whatever. They go back down, whatever. The guy says, you owe me more money. And then in the middle of the night, at the end of the second or third year, they would sneak up and go and move someplace else. You know. And what we really began to look at some particular point is that one of the things with this book, with her, that sometimes the reviews are very bad about this book because people get saying all her Negroes are happy and singing, whatever. Some of the people wrote reviews on. But there was some sites, if you read the beginning of the book, where people, beginning of Dust Tracks on the Road, autobiography that I had marked to, there were some people who said, hey, every place, every major city that we go into, you do know at some point, when people had money, they also had to have servants. You know, so you go up to Boston, you go here in New York, whatever, you know, you go places in Philadelphia, right, where the main line is, but right around the main line, you know, are places that now are really fancy, middle-class places, but those were the servants. So you could not have these big homes without having some servants someplace, whatever, you know. And so some of these people here had jobs, right, you know, and this city that he builds almost single-handedly, right, you know, with the help of white folks, whatever, you know. There were places like that in the South and in the North also too. The problem today, quite often, is some of those same sites that started out with people being servants. You go to Oak Bluffs, right? You know, Martha's Vineyard, Oak Bluffs, that's the black section. Oak Bluffs, what were they? They were servants for the people in Martha's Vineyard, right? But you would never know that today the way people act. You know, like, you gotta get this, you see. So that's what I'm saying. So sometimes I see people like that, I want to say, I got it. So that's what I'm talking about, you see. Because if you don't have a vision for you and your people, right? If you go to another class, and that's going to go to another class, whatever, etc., right? And the rest, he kept saying to her, you know what, you can't be on the porch with them people. Look at them people. They're not our kind, he's saying. They're not our, he didn't say class, but they're not our class, is what he's saying. You see? And she said, hold it. Those people bring the music. Those people bring the language that I love so much. They bring the stories that I want to repeat and join in the conversations. And he said, no, girl, you can't do that because you heard that conversation for him. Come on, stay with me. I God, was about himself. It wasn't about what was going on. The other conversation was going on in the world. You know what I mean? Whatever. But the conversation he wanted, that he was always the king. He had the solutions always, ever. That's why they hated him sometimes. But when she spoke, it flowed. You know, it was musical. You know, it went. You know, it was like, it was indeed purely egalitarian kind of conversation. It wasn't like I. So that's really what happened until you began to see then that when she said, I will leave this first husband. Because, you know, that expression, I have it written down, his head looked like what? His head looked like what? I got it. His head looked like...
His foot's terrible, Professor Sanchez.
Description. It's amazing.
I think it's one of the reasons why they were clashing so much.
Skullhead. He looked like some old skullhead in the graveyard.
Exactly. Thank you. I just found it. No, Nanny. No, ma'am. Is that what he'd been hanging around here for? He looked like some old skullhead in the graveyard. You know what I mean? Now, that's a description, people. Okay. You know, that is a description. But all Nanny is saying is that I cannot let happen to you what happened to my daughter. I got to do something for my granddaughter. And what I got to do for my granddaughter right now is to make sure that you marry a man for protection. That's all, for protection, right? You know, and then she tells her the history and the herstory. Come to your grandma, honey. Sit in her lap like you used to. Your nanny wouldn't harm a hair on your head. She don't want nobody else to do it neither if she can help it. Because she's saying, I'm still helpless. She's saying, I cannot protect you. I didn't protect my daughter, and you're going to get to be 16. Just leaning back, look at that bees. You know what I mean? You look at it and you feel relieved and you have a sexual moment. That's what she said. I saw you have a sexual moment. I am scared to death right now. I got to get you out someplace where you'll be safe, right? Honey, the white man is the ruler of everything. Listen to that. As far as I've been able to find out, maybe it's someplace way off in the ocean where the black man is in power, but we don't know nothing but what we see. So the white man throw down the load and tell the nigger man to pick it up. He pick it up because we have to, but he don't tote it. He handed to his women's folks. The nigger woman is the mule of the world so far as I can see. I've been praying for it to be different with you, Lord, Lord, Lord. Right. I don't know how I'm on page 29. I don't know if it's the same page.
14.
Yeah, it's probably, I know it's different. Right. This is the old book. Hear that. You know, until you truly understand why she's pushing. But it's her dream. It is not indeed Janie's dream. But the point is that you and I know that our parents always have dreams for us, right? And those dreams are always about protecting us. It's not about hurting us, but like making sure that we are protected. Is that not so? And so she pushes this in note. And then she goes on and talks about the history. She said, you know, honey, us colored folks is branches without roots. And that makes things come round in queer ways. You in particular. I was born back doing slavery, so it wasn't for me to fulfill my dreams of what a woman ought to be and what to do. You should have underlined that 20 times. 20 million times. You know, 16 times, right, whatever. Because you have to do that, and I'll do it again. Because here, I was born back doing slavery, so it wasn't for me to fulfill my dreams of what a woman ought to be able to do. That's one of them holdbacks of slavery. But nothing can stop you from wishing. You can't beat nobody down so low till you can rob them of their will. I didn't want to be used for a work ox and a brood sow, and I didn't want my daughter used that way neither. It sure wasn't my will for things to happen like they did, and even hate the way you was going. But all the same, I said, thank God I got another chance. I wanted to preach a great sermon about colored women sitting on high, but there wasn't no pulpit for me. Freedom found me with a baby daughter in my arms, so I said, I'd take a broom and a cook pot and throw up a highway through the wilderness for her. That's what she's saying. I'm going to be a cook. I'm going to go into houses, that's going to be my freedom for you. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to go with some white folks, who will protect us, because I'll be the major cook in there, and that will be. So she says, I take a broom and a cook pot and throw up a highway through the wilderness for her. She would expound, I felt, but somehow she got lost off of the highway. And next thing I know, here you was and in the world. So whilst I was tending you of nights, I saved the text for you. I've been waiting a long time, Janie, but nothing I've been through ain't too much if you don't just take a stand on high ground like I dreamed, And it's scriptural. I mean, you hear the scriptures there. You know what I mean? You understand that this woman, Zora Neale Hurston, who was this anthropologist, is going to also bring us the scriptural thing in here. So she's telling it this herstory. It's not a history, people, it's a herstory. Okay, she's teaching this herstory, and for us to understand. And she said, that morning on the big plantation close to the ladder, a rider cut in a gallop telling about Sherman taking Atlanta. Moss Roberts' son had done been killed at Chickamauga. So he grabbed his gun and straddled his best horse and went off with the rest of the gray-headed men and young boys to drive the Yankees back into Tennessee. They was all cheering and crying and shouting for the men that was riding off. I couldn't see nothing because your mama wasn't but a week old. And I was flat on my back, but pretty soon he let on he forgot something and went into my cabin and made me let down my hair for the last time. Listen to that. See, what people really never talk about is that the love people had for these women. The love these men had for these African American women, these African women, But what the white woman knew, she knew. She said, whoa, by golly, by gee, wait until I get you by yourself. Otherwise, if she thought it was just lust, hear this, she wouldn't come down to do anything to her. She wouldn't have beat on her, you know, like in Clotel. You know, she would not have hung her up for someplace in Clotel till she could not breathe and almost died until the master got home and cut her down, whatever. I mean, those women literally would hang people up until to dry until they almost were dead. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, because they knew that these men loved these women. All that they were these enclosed, terrible looking women. So, I mean, the funny thing about all of this, remember the movies that we saw all the time from Hollywood. The movies we saw in Hollywood is that the women, the black women who were in the houses were always had to be a million pounds big, right? And they would roll, oh, Miss Lucy May, Miss Lucy May, I don't mean to do nothing, Miss Lucy May. Miss Lucy May, you know, like that, oh, no good man done left you, Miss Lucy May. Oh, I'm going to be here for you. Just give me them shillings, right? You know, and I'm going to take care of that. Now, she's not taking care of her shillings at home, but I'm going to take care of these shillings for you. Hear that? And people in the movies just said, oh, look at that. You know, oh, look at that. Coming full circle. You got to understand why Obama cannot curse out that man that he's debating.
Yes.
Yeah.
You cursing him out at home. But if Obama curses him out on television, he will lose everything. You understand this book? When you look at Obama, and he has to learn, he has not come through a Harlem like we came through, that we know how to curse people out without cursing them out.
Come on, gotta change. Come on.
You know, you do it with a smile, with a look up, whatever. That's what you do. You know, and you curse the sucker out left and right before he knows he's cursed out, whatever. And you don't use one curse word, but the audience will know. But you see, Obama didn't come through our culture, so he doesn't understand that. So a man can lie and lie and lie and lie and lie and lie as he did, the other guy did, right? Okay? And he doesn't know how to call him a liar in code. This is a code. You know, if you know how to call, it's a code, whatever. And people would know. But if he were to say you lie, then all the white folks in America say, oh, he's not a nice guy, whatever. And so he won't get reelected. That's just an aside, you know, but I just had to say that because at some point someone asked that question when I was away, you know, in New Orleans. And I just said, you know, the point is that you got to understand when you're on that idiot box. What Obama has to do, gosh, he needs a black cabinet. I've said it for 4 years now, right? You know, and he needs someone writing for him. That when he looks at that camera, you know, he does this language, you know, that will draw people doing this. Be you white, black, green, purple, blue, whatever. And the fool standing on the right will look like a fool, you know, because if you use the language, you'll know that the emperor has no clothes on. So people will